They thought the pain would break you. They thought the scars would stay forever. But something changed. Something they never expected. You survived every betrayal, every sleepless night, every moment they left you to suffer alone. And now, congratulations. It's over. That pain that once controlled your mind, that fear that kept you awake, that weight you carried for so long, will never touch you again, because the version of you that suffered is gone, and what remains is something stronger, something wiser, something impossible to destroy. They wanted to watch you fall. Instead, they witnessed your rebirth. So smile, because this isn't the end of your story. This is the moment your enemies realize they lost, and you finally realize you already won. They thought the pain would stay with you forever. They thought those sleepless nights, those memories, those disappointments, and those scars would become your permanent reality. They believed that once life knocked you down enough times, you would stop trying to stand. They expected you to become comfortable with suffering. They assumed that pain had become your identity, but they were wrong. Pain has a strange way of making people believe that it will never leave. When you're trapped inside it, every day feels like proof that tomorrow will be the same. Every disappointment feels permanent. Every betrayal feels unforgettable. Every lonely night convinces you that this is simply who you are now. But pain lies. It speaks in fear. It whispers that nothing will ever change. It tells you that happiness belongs to other people. It convinces you that peace is something you'll only watch others enjoy. But pain doesn't own you. There were moments when you questioned yourself. Moments when you looked around and wondered why life seemed easier for everyone else. You carried burdens nobody knew about. You smiled while hiding battles that nobody could see. You kept moving even when your mind was exhausted. You kept showing up even when your heart wanted to disappear. And nobody understood how much strength it took just to survive another day. You remember those nights. The nights when silence became louder than noise. The nights when memories attacked your mind without mercy. The nights when disappointment sat beside you like an unwanted companion. You remember asking questions that seemed to have no answers. You remember searching for hope while surrounded by darkness. You remember trying to understand why things had to hurt so much. And maybe the worst part wasn't the pain itself. Maybe it was believing that the pain would never end. Because that's what suffering does. It tricks you into thinking it has already won. It makes temporary storms feel eternal. It makes scars feel like chains. It makes fear sound like truth. And after hearing those lies for so long, you begin to accept them. You begin to believe that peace is impossible. You begin to think that happiness has forgotten your address. But life doesn't stay the same forever. Storms don't ask for permission to leave. Seasons don't remain frozen. Even the darkest night eventually surrenders to the morning. Nothing painful was designed to last forever. Nothing broken remains broken if there is still breath inside you. Nothing lost stays lost when there is still hope alive somewhere deep inside your soul. And that's what nobody talks about. You survived days that you thought would destroy you. You survived moments that felt impossible. You survived disappointments that almost stole your faith. You survived betrayals that nearly changed your heart forever. You survived loneliness that felt endless. You survived tears nobody ever saw. And somehow, despite everything, you're still here. Not because life was easy. Not because people saved you. Not because circumstances became perfect. You're here because something inside you refused to surrender. Something stronger than fear kept pushing forward. Something greater than pain refused to die. Even when you doubted yourself, that strength remained alive. Even when you cried, it remained alive. Even when you wanted to give up, it remained alive. And now, something is changing. The pain that once controlled your thoughts is losing its power. The memories that once broke you are no longer deciding your future. The voices that once convinced you that life was over are becoming quieter. The chains that once held your spirit are weakening. Because healing doesn't always arrive with noise. Sometimes healing enters quietly. Sometimes healing begins when you realize that the worst days are behind you. Sometimes healing begins when you stop asking why and start recognizing how far you're dodged. Sometimes healing begins when you understand that surviving was never your weakness. Surviving was proof that pain never had the final word. And the truth they never expected is this: the pain that once ruled your life is no longer the king. The fear that once controlled your thoughts no longer has authority. The suffering that once convinced you that you were finished no longer gets to decide who you call. Because what felt endless was never permanent. What felt impossible was never forever. And what once seemed powerful enough to destroy you was never strong enough to keep you down. They thought suffering would make you weak. They thought every betrayal would steal your confidence. Every failure would crush your spirit. And every painful memory would slowly turn you into someone who no longer believed in themselves. They expected the pressure to break you. They expected the loneliness to destroy you. They expected the pain to become too heavy for you to carry. But pain doesn't always create victims. Sometimes pain creates warriors. Nobody talks about the hidden side of suffering. Nobody talks about what happens when a person keeps getting back up after being knocked down again and again. Nobody talks about the strength that grows inside someone who has been forced to survive things they never deserved, because strength isn't born in comfort. Wisdom isn't created during easy seasons. Character isn't built when life gives you everything you want. The strongest parts of you were born in moments you wanted to forget. Those sleepless nights taught you patience. Those disappointments taught you who truly belongs in your life. Those betrayals taught you the difference between promises and loyalty. Those lonely seasons taught you how to stand without leaning on people who only appeared when things were easy. Every scar carried a lesson. Every heartbreak left behind understanding. Every tear taught you something about yourself that comfort never could. There were moments when you hated what you were going through. You asked yourself why things had to happen this way. You questioned your purpose. You questioned your worth. You questioned whether all the suffering had any meaning at all. And maybe you didn't realize it at the time. But while you were asking those questions, something incredible was happening inside you. You were changing, not into someone bitter, not into someone defeated, but into someone who sees the world differently. Someone who no longer chases approval. Someone who no longer begs to be accepted. Someone who understands that peace is more valuable than popularity. Someone who has learned that not everyone deserves access to their heart. Pain taught you to recognize fake smiles. Pain taught you to value genuine people. Pain taught you that trust is precious. Pain taught you that not every battle deserves your energy. And while others were busy judging your scars, they never understood that those scars represented survival. They saw damage, but heaven saw growth. They saw weakness, but life was building resilience. They saw broken pieces, but something greater was shaping a stronger version of you. Because pressure reveals character, fire reveals strength, storms reveal endurance, and suffering reveals who you really are. There are people who only know how to smile when life is perfect, but you learned how to keep walking when everything around you was falling apart. You learned how to carry pain without losing compassion. You learned how to continue despite disappointment. You learned how to stay kind even after being hurt. And that kind of strength cannot be bought. It cannot be borrowed. It cannot be faked. It must be earned. Every battle you faced became a teacher. Every rejection pushed you closer to understanding your value. Every closed door forced you to discover new paths. Every setback taught you that your destiny was never attached to one opportunity, one person, or one season. The things you once cried about no longer control your emotions the way they used to. The fears that once consumed your thoughts no longer hold the same power. The opinions that once hurt you have become meaningless, because suffering changed your priorities. You stopped chasing attention. You stopped seeking validation. You stopped expecting everyone to understand you. You stopped allowing temporary people to define your permanent worth. And that's when strength became visible. Not the loud kind. Not the kind that needs applause. Not the kind that demands recognition. The quiet strength. The kind that survives betrayal without becoming cruel. The kind that survives failure without losing hope. The kind that survives loneliness without losing faith. The kind that keeps moving when nobody is watching. Because real strength doesn't announce itself. It reveals itself through endurance. And every painful chapter that tried to destroy you ended up building something they never saw coming. A mind that thinks differently, a heart that loves more carefully, a spirit that bends but refuses to break, a soul that understands pain but refuses to be ruled by it. The same suffering they thought would bury you became the fire that forged you. The same darkness they expected to consume you became the place where your eyes adjusted and your vision became clearer. The same storms that were meant to destroy your confidence taught you how powerful you truly are. And without realizing it, every difficult season was shaping a version of you that comfort alone could never create. Every scar became proof. Every battle became preparation. Every painful memory became a reminder that strength is not something you were born with. Strength is something your suffering forced you to discover. For so long, you thought victory was something far away. You thought it belonged to people with perfect lives, perfect timing, and perfect circumstances. You believed that one day, somehow, after all the pain disappeared and every problem was solved, then maybe you would finally have permission to feel proud of yourself. Maybe then you would be allowed to smile. Maybe then you would deserve peace. But victory was never waiting at the finish line. Victory began the moment you refused to quit. People misunderstand what winning really looks like. They imagine trophies, applause, and recognition. They imagine success as something loud. They imagine victory as a moment everyone can see. But some of the greatest victories happen in silence. Some victories happen when nobody notices. Some victories happen inside the soul before they ever appear in the world. You won when you survived the days that almost destroyed you. You won when you got out of bed even though your mind was exhausted. You won when you chose peace instead of revenge. You won when you continued to believe despite disappointment. You won when you carried pain without allowing it to poison your heart. Because victory isn't always about defeating others. Sometimes victory is refusing to let darkness defeat you. There were times when life made you feel invisible. Times when you questioned whether your efforts mattered. Times when you watched others move ahead while you struggled just to stay standing. You wondered if you were falling behind. You wondered if life had forgotten you. You wondered if your best days had already passed. But while you were focused on what you lacked, you forgot to recognize what you had already overcome. You forgot how many storms failed to destroy you. You forgot how many fears you faced. You forgot how many disappointments you survived. You forgot how many times you started over. And every single time life knocked you down, you stood up again. Not perfectly, not without tears, not without scars, but you stood up, and that alone made you different. Because many people surrender long before they reach the breakthrough. Many people give up because they mistake delay for defeat. They confuse pain with failure. They confuse struggles with the end of the story. They assume that because things are difficult, nothing good is coming. But difficulty has never been proof that you are losing. Sometimes difficulty is proof that you're growing. Sometimes resistance appears because you're getting closer. Sometimes the pressure increases because the old version of you is disappearing. You are not the same person you used to be. The fears that once controlled you don't have the same voice anymore. The people who once held power over your emotions no longer own your peace. The mistakes that once haunted your thoughts are no longer your identity, because growth changes everything. You have become more patient, more aware, more disciplined, more careful about who you trust, more protective of your peace, more grateful for the little things. And while others are waiting for a miracle to arrive, they fail to see that miracles often begin inside ordinary moments. Victory begins when you choose healing over bitterness. Victory begins when you stop chasing people who don't value you. Victory begins when you understand that your worth was never connected to someone else's opinion. Victory begins when you stop fighting battles that no longer deserve your energy. Victory begins when you stop looking backward and start appreciating how far you've already come. Because there comes a moment when you stop asking why everything happened and start realizing that every painful chapter carried a purpose. Every closed door redirected you. Every disappointment taught you something. Every lonely season forced you to discover your own strength. And while you thought life was punishing you, life was preparing you, preparing your mind, preparing your heart, preparing your spirit, preparing you for a future that requires wisdom, patience, and strength. That's why you don't need everyone's approval anymore. You don't need revenge. You don't need to prove yourself to people who misunderstood you. You don't need permission to become who you were meant to be. Because real victory isn't found in making others regret losing you. Real victory is waking up with peace. Real victory is no longer carrying yesterday's pain. Real victory is smiling without pretending. Real victory is knowing that no matter what tried to break you, you are still here, still standing, still breathing, still believing, still becoming, still moving forward, still refusing to surrender, still choosing hope when fear demands defeat, still carrying dreams that the world said were impossible, still walking through storms with faith inside your soul, still rising after every fall, still discovering that strength was never something waiting in the future. It was growing inside you every single day you chose not to give up.